This is southern cattail, or Typha domingensis, and the well-known cattail, Typha latifolia, broadleaf cattail, is probably usable in all the same ways as this one, and vice versa. And perhaps all cattails can be used the same. So it had many uses among various American Indians for food, medicine, and material, particularly for food. So first of all, the flowers are called a spadix, which looks kind of like the cattail head, except thinner and green. That was eaten by the northern Paiute when it was young and green and fresh, and it was eaten raw. The pollen was also eaten by the northern Paiute and Cahuilla, and that was tapped off into a basket and formed into cakes or mush, and those cakes would be wrapped into cattail leaves and baked. And it sounds like a lot of work for not much, but it actually has been measured to have a very high rate of return for calories for energy expended. The seeds, which are at the end of these little fluff balls, also called the forbidden corn dog, those were eaten by the Gosyute, Northern Paiute, and various other tribes. So you don't want to eat them straight like this. It would be a little hard to swallow, but they would be piled up on the ground into piles like 2 or 3 feet high, and then set fire to. And when those burned, it would roast off this fluff and also roast the seeds, which are these tiny little things at the base of them. They're kind of like a little dandelion if you blow one off. And you do that on a flat rock and then sweep up the seeds, which are now already roasted, grind it into a meal, and then boil it into a mush. The shoots, when they're really young and coming up from the ground, about 4 to 16 inches tall, when they're emerging from lateral roots in the early spring to midsummer, those were peeled and eaten raw by the Cree and various other peoples. They're sweeter and better tasting when they're from moving water versus stagnant water. I'm kind of in a swampy area right now. I probably won't be eating any of this. It's also a city and there's some roads nearby. So you gotta be careful with aquatic plants, the surrounding environments. They're especially susceptible to taking up pollutants from the environment. But from the pristine, moving water, they're considered very sweet and good tasting. The roots are well known for cattail to be edible. And now it's not just all the roots in general. They have root stocks, which are areas of the roots which preserve their starches or carbohydrates. And they're usually about a few inches below the soil surface, and they can be eaten anytime, but they're richest in starch at the end of the growing season. And you need to peel them first, and the central white core, around a centimeter in diameter, that can be eaten raw, boiled, baked, or dried for storage and ground into a meal. And the roots were known to be eaten by the Apache, Cahuilla, Cree, Iroquois, Northern Paiute, and various other tribes. Now this fruit down was actually used for dressing burns and scalds by the Dakota, Omaha, Ponca, Winnebago, and Pawnee. And they also used it to prevent diaper chafing. The roots were used by the Cahuilla to heal bleeding wounds. And those uses are for the broadleaf cattail, but they're probably usable the same way for this. They're pretty much the same in every way, except for the breadth of the leaves. And the pollen of this species was used as a face paint by the Seri, and the pollen of the broadleaf cattail was used for ceremonial markings by the Apache and Navajo. This fruit down, I'm slowly being buried in it. It was used for padding, uses padding for pillows, blankets, and for the cradle boards by various tribes, including the Dakota, Omaha, Pawnee, Ponca, Winnebago, Osage, and Klamath. And the pads of this down were used as diapers for various Plains Indian tribes. And the Ojibwe would use it in battle, actually. They would throw it into the face of their enemies to potentially blind them. And the Ojibwe also used them to stuff mattresses and quilts. The leaves and the stems of the broadleaf cattail were made into mats for thatching houses or just for sitting by the Mexican Kickapoo, Osage, Ojibwe, Menominee, and Klamath. And the leaves are also used for basketry and mats for sweat houses by the Flathead, and just generally used for matting and for bedding. The root fibers were soaked into pine pitch and used to caulk boats by the Menominee. What is that called? There's a name for it. Anyway, it's a really cool plant with a lot of interesting uses, but don't forget the most important one of all, pocket fluff.